My name is Leslie Paisley, and I'm the Paper Conservator Department Head at the Williamstown Art Conservation Center, where I've worked. I've just figured out it's been 20 years this year. The lab, however, has been here since 1977. The original consortium consisted of just 5 museums, and we've now grown to about 55 museums that we serve throughout the New England and sort of eastern seaboard. What's wonderful about a collection like the Norman Rockwell Museum is to have a very vast and wide group of objects by a single artist, because you do begin to understand their working technique and become familiar with their materials and the conditions, so that when you see an object in good condition, you can then compare it to similar works from the same time period. This is a preliminary, fully worked up charcoal study, and it's full scale to the size of the painting that he would have executed. This is just his drawing to try out his images and make his composition and to get all of the tonal values correct before he moves on to the final painting. So in the process of creating this, he isn't always or wasn't always concerned with how long this particular work on paper was going to last. The charcoal itself is very stable to light, so the media will not fade, unlike if it were a felt tip pen or even some dye-based colorants. So the media itself will be in good condition. The paper is probably the weak link. The paper is a pretty good quality paper, but with this particular drawing, he used a rubber cement, which, you know, anyone who's used it and come back to it later on realizes it yellows and it becomes very stiff and cracks and brittle with time. As he was changing his composition, he could only work the paper so far, and then he would have to cut out a section and replace it with a new piece of paper, because the paper, while it could hold up to a lot of manipulation with the media, at some point it just wouldn't receive the media in the same way. So it looks like as though he was about to cut this figure out and possibly replace it with another one, but didn't take it past this area, and so this part is stuck down with a glue, which is beginning, the rubber cement is starting to show through to the front, the adhesive, because the paper is so thin. And you'll see that in some areas of the surface of the drawing, it's raised up. It's sort of either delaminated from the paperboard support behind it, or it never adhered well to begin with. What's really interesting is the areas where it's raised up from the acidic support are the areas where the paper seems to have darkened more readily than the areas that were well stuck, because as air got into the space between the drawing and the paperboard, more oxidation could occur, so more yellowing could occur. In this particular case, this work, the first step will be to separate the cardboard layer from the wooden layer. And I'm going to be doing that by inserting a screwdriver between the 2 layers to lift that off, so that I can then pry up the staples from the outer edge in such a way that they're not going to damage the drawing further than they already have. So then once that's free of the plywood support, it'll be much lighter in weight. The paper board itself is at least 1/8 of an inch thick, and it consists of several laminate layers. And what I'm hoping I can do is to delaminate the cardboard down to the last layer. And then we will remove the backing from the face layer by layer, just to get down to the adhesive layer. I feel like a mouse making my nest. The reason we have to get the adhesive off is that we won't be able to do any kind of aqueous treatment on the piece without removing the adhesive, which is really acting as a barrier. It's sort of clogging the pores of the paper and not allowing it to wash well. He apparently applied the rubber cement to the back of the drawing and to the back of the cardboard support to create a sort of a contact adhesive. So there will be probably an excess of that adhesive, which means that we'll have to go back, once all the paper layers are gone, go back with an organic solvent to solubilize those adhesive residues. An aqueous treatment is one which involves water. So we don't always say washing because sometimes one can't fully wet up the paper and either float wash it or immerse it. But there are many forms of aqueous treatment. Some of them involve just using moisture. And then before we would do any kind of bathing of this drawing, we would first dampen it up aqueously using probably a Gore-Tex membrane to humidify it from both sides to relax the paper. Gore-Tex is the same material that's used for rain gear. What's wonderful about it is it allows the water vapor to penetrate, but without water droplets to penetrate to the middle. So we can gently and very evenly relax the paper and sort of open up the pores of the paper before we put it on a bath. So by evenly humidifying it from both sides, the paper expands evenly and it's more ready to lie flat, especially if we're going to pursue the float washing technique. As I first began with the smallest section and worked out my treatment procedures on it, we found it could withstand float washing, and then there was no transfer of the media to either a Q-tip or a blotter when we were touching the surface to remove the solubilized discoloration, which gave us the feeling that it would be possible to sink the drawing. And I think in the end, what it is doing is it's enabling us to thoroughly wash the paper, which if we weren't able to immerse it, we wouldn't have been able to solubilize as evenly all of the solubilized acids and discolorations. You probably noticed that in the course of treating this aqueously, which is what we call the washing procedure in purified water, the drawing itself was able to be submerged completely, which is something that typically a charcoal drawing would not be capable of withstanding. It's only because the artist was so concerned about it, the media not smudging as he was working it, that he really did apply a very thick layer of fixative. In general, this is a pretty extreme treatment for a drawing of this kind. So just for those of you at home who might be looking at this video thinking that you can carry these similar procedures out on your own artwork or that of artists whose work you collect, we as conservators are not allowed to fix a charcoal drawing of this kind in order to treat it. And I wouldn't recommend doing that yourself unless you're the artist and it's part of your working procedure. I sort of like to think of myself almost like a naturopathic doctor. You know, I'm sort of more holistic about it. I don't like to just treat local areas and go after this stain or that bulge or that tear. And so whatever we've put this drawing through will help to ensure that it ages evenly overall. As long as it's well exhibited and not indefinitely exhibited, you know, it should be there to enjoy for future generations.